A new poll revealed over 2/3 of Europeans believe their country would not be able to defend itself militarily against a Russian attack. The findings come just days after President Vladimir Putin said Russia is ready if Europe wants to wage war. The country with the highest confidence in its military's ability to take on Russia was France, although the majority of the respondents still had a negative outlook. The lowest rates were registered in Belgium, Italy, and Portugal. According to the authors of the poll, geography plays a key role. Countries that feel less capable are geographically distant from Russia and therefore least likely to engage in direct military confrontation with Moscow. In response to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the EU has been pushing a massive rearmament effort with hundreds of billions of euros poured in defense spending by EU countries. Yet the lack of confidence of the general public suggests that the many announcements made by member states to do so is not resonating with a large segment of the European population.
Cypriot President Nikos Christodoulidis met with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv on Thursday during his first visit since the Russian invasion. The two leaders discussed EU-Ukraine relations, the progress of the country's accession negotiations, and the contribution of the incoming Cyprus presidency of the EU to Ukraine.
Σε μια περίοδο, κυρίες και κύριοι, όπου οι γεωπολιτικές πιέσεις αυξάνονται, η Ευρώπη χρειάζεται συνοχή, χρειάζεται ενότητα, χρειάζεται αποφασιστικότητα και η Κυπριακή Δημοκρατία είναι πανέτοιμη να συμβάλλει προς αυτή την κατεύθυνση. Και μέσα σε αυτό το πλαίσιο η συνέχιση της πολυδιάστατης στήριξης της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης προς την Ουκρανία αποτελεί βασική προτεραιότητα της Κυπριακής Προεδρίας του Συμβουλίου.
Я хочу подякувати Кіпру за підтримку на політичному рівні. Це стосується, зокрема, перемовин щодо членства України в Європейському Союзі. Ми розраховуємо, що найближчі місяці дадуть більше прогресу для шляху України в ЄС, і кіпрське головування може стати історичним з точки зору відкриття кластерів для України та інших необхідних рішень.
Cyprus is taking over the Council for the European Union presidency from Denmark in January and will be followed by Ireland in the second half of 2026.
The EU's former High Representative Federica Mogherini has resigned as rector of the College of Europe following accusations of fraud and corruption. An investigation into Mogherini was launched by the European Public Prosecutor's Office after she and two other suspects were questioned on Tuesday, with Belgian authorities searching the offices of the European External Action Service, the College of Europe in Bruges, and several private homes. Mogherini had led the elite institution, which specializes in European affairs, since 2020. The investigation is centered on whether tendering rules were broken in the award of a 9-month training course for young diplomats at the college between 2021 and 2022. On Wednesday, the three suspects were formally notified of accusations including procurement fraud, corruption, conflict of interest and violation of professional secrecy. Stefano Sannino, former EEAS Secretary General, is also under investigation and has taken early leave from his current role at the European Commission.
5 Palestinians, including 2 children, were killed by an Israeli strike on southern Gaza on Wednesday, according to local officials. The attack on the shelter camp in Han Yunis left at least 32 others injured. Israel said it targeted Hamas militants in retaliation for an earlier assault on Wednesday that injured 5 of its soldiers. The latest violence came as another breach of the fragile ceasefire in force since early October that has largely held up despite mutual claims of violations. On Wednesday, Hamas returned one of the last remaining hostages, identified as a Thai national, who was killed during the Hamas-led attack on southern Israel, while Israel indicated it will open the Rafah crossing in the next few days to allow Palestinians in need of medical care to leave for Egypt. According to the Israeli military arm that oversees humanitarian matters, the opening of the Rafah crossing will be coordinated with Egypt under the supervision of the EU mission.
A grand reception at Beijing's Great Hall of the People welcomed French President Emmanuel Macron on Thursday for talks with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. The war in Ukraine was the first topic on the agenda. While China says it wants peace, it has never condemned Russia's invasion and has hosted President Vladimir Putin several times since the conflict began. Brussels also suspects China of supplying military components to Russia. Macron urged Xi to pressure Moscow, but Xi rejected any responsibility for the crisis. Macron, joined by 35 business leaders, also pushed for cross-investments to rebalance trade and called for cooperation with the G7 on rules-based economic governance. Trade imbalances from electric cars to steel remain a major point of friction with China. At the end of the talks, the two countries signed a letter of intent to strengthen cooperation. We spoke to our correspondent in Paris, Sofia Katsinkova, who tells us more.
Despite these tensions, Macron and Xi Jinping still signed 12 cooperation agreements on bilateral investment, nuclear energy, and even panda conservation.
The EU is proposing a new strategy to protect the European economy from coercive trade measures in third countries. The European Security Doctrine is the European Commission's policy to lower dependencies on countries such as China and the US, where recent actions have raised concerns about hostile or coercive measures which could seriously harm European industry. The doctrine recommends, among other things, that member states and businesses diversify supply chains in areas such as critical raw materials, rare earths, semiconductors and technology chips. A recent confrontation between the Chinese and Dutch governments threatened the global automotive industry. EU Trade Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič said this incident was an example of why dependencies are a vulnerability for Europe.
I think that it just put into the new limelight the importance of the economic security for the European Union, and it just shows that dependencies could be very dangerous, could be very expensive. From the longer-term perspective, I think what is very important is that we would also diversify and increase the number of suppliers of, in this case, legacy chips. But I can speak about critical raw minerals. I can speak about sensitive technologies, because simply when you are reliable just on one supplier, usually it presents it also presents a lot of risks.
At the same time, you can do all these trade deals with other countries, let's say away from China. You can have an economic security doctrine, but really businesses will decide who they want to do their trade with. And often they'll choose price over standards or over security. And that often means China.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think that we are also, with this communication, trying to bring the new light to the economic security aspect of the business. I think that you see it everywhere in the world. You see it in the US, you see it in Japan. I think that this economic security risk premium must be more and more factored in the business plans of European companies. Simply, we need to learn how to be alerted about the possible shortcomings. We have to learn how to stockpile critical raw materials or sensitive products, and we have to be also maybe ready to pay more for the investments, but also for the procuring of the be it critical minerals or critical components from various sources, because this is how you can guarantee your business continuity.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has admitted to a recent phone conversation with US President Donald Trump. Speaking about the details of the government event in Caracas, Maduro on Wednesday said the call to him was made from the White House in Washington. The Venezuelan leader hinted at why he had not spoken about it publicly until now.
Cuando hay cosas importantes, en silencio tienen que ser, hasta que se den, ¿verdad? Yo tuve una llamada y conversé con el presidente de Estados Unidos, Donald Trump. Puedo decir que la conversación fue en un tono de respeto. Inclusive, puedo decir que fue cordial. entre el presidente de los Estados Unidos y el presidente de Venezuela.
Trump had spoken about the phone call the two men had on 21 November, reportedly giving Maduro an ultimatum to leave Venezuela. The talks came amid a U.S. threat to carry out land attacks in Venezuela against drug cartels. In recent weeks, the U.S. Navy has sunk several suspected drug traffickers in the Caribbean and sent its largest aircraft carrier to the region, putting pressure on Maduro.